Okay, I think we're good to go here.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Lize.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
Lize DeCoster. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Great. Well, let me first introduce you before we get into it here. The overall sort of topic I think we're going to be talking about is cohesion and the role of oxytocin in that process.
Yeah.
And the application of that, and I think it's going to be a really exciting and interesting conversation, particularly because we're coming at this from really two similar but different fields, and so I think there's some really interesting areas of overlap and potential collaboration and synergy there. But so Lize, you are a research fellow. If I understand correctly,
yeah,
at University of California, San Francisco, in the band laboratory,
yeah.
and the band lab is the Bonding and Attunement in Neuropsychiatric Disorders Laboratory.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Joshua Woolley is the director of that laboratory. He's a psychiatrist and assistant professor at UCF. And the San Francisco VA Medical Center, and he has an MD and a PhD in neuroscience. It's from UCSF, and has been looking at all different kinds of clinical and in this case, in some of his newest stuff, in some applied military or some military applications for his work. I don't necessarily know that it's clinical in nature. It looks like it's more sort of performance oriented.
Yeah.
And so what's been so welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so what's been your role and your experience out there so far, and how long have you been there?
I've been here only since August 2015, and so I started on the project. So it's called ECHO. And it's on, as you said, team cohesion and how oxytocin could influence team cohesion and how this might be applied to military small groups in particular.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think that's going to be the bulk of what we talk about, and I'd really like to start digging into that a little bit. So ECHO, this project, is the intranasal oxytocin and enhancement of team cohesion project. And so there's a few things that I think we should probably untangle for our audience here, which is, what are these things? And I think a good place to start would be, well, why did you choose? Why are you working with the military population?
So the project is also like a grant from the Department of Defense, and I think like the overall goal, like the broader project, is aimed because so we work at the Veterans Hospital, and a lot of veterans and people coming back from the military have like severe psychiatric disorders like PTSD, schizophrenia, and the project is aimed at looking so there is some evidence that more cohesive groups, it's like a protective factor against these disorders. And then, the idea is to see how, we can promote cohesion in these groups, and with oxytocin, for example, if this would be possible, because it's such a big problem. So the overall goal is really to see if we can enhance cohesion in some way that would be beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that I found really interesting and that landed me on the webpage that explains your project in the first place. I think it might have been a search on oxytocin, because I've been thinking about oxytocin and its application in health promotion for for a while, and in particular promoting physical activity, because a lot of behavior change programs rely on groups, or they're group based. And so promoting a sense of cohesion tends to facilitate that behavior change process at the group level. But in the broader sense, I'm glad you brought up sort of like these broader health concerns, right? Because really what ties all of this together is the overall idea that social relationships are important for health, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And some populations are suffer disproportionately from poor relationships, or could benefit more from positive relationships, such as the military population, these guys who are, and women who are, going under such tremendous stress, and need some kind of protective factor to buffer the impact of that. So I think that's kind of how we, how I found you and how we, came together here.
Yeah.
And so the idea now let's talk about oxytocin for a second, because oxytocin is naturally produced.
Yes, exactly.
In the body.
Exactly.
And some people call it the love hormone, the bonding chemical, lots of different names for it. But maybe you could talk just a little bit more about what oxytocin is, what it does.
Yeah, so it's a neurohormone, and as you said, it's naturally produced in the body, and there is a lot of research on it, and it seems to promote bonding behavior between groups. It seems to promote all kinds of positive social behaviors. And the research is a bit mixed, because it's a bit difficult. It seems to promote positive in-group behavior. There's some mixed evidence on what it does to in-group versus out-group behavior, but at least it seems to do something, enhance social relationships. And in the lab here, for example, we also work with people with schizophrenia and PTSD who have a lot of social cognitive deficits, and there's not much treatment at the moment that helps these kind of deficits. And as you said, like, social relationships seems to be a very important factor. And it seems like oxytocin can help for these kind of deficits in some way. So.
Right. Yeah, and it's an interesting. I mean, the same concept is applied to all other kinds of hormones that you might naturally find in the body, anyways, right? You're just sort of like supplementing it with a manufactured version of it to get more of the effect that you want. But it is kind of interesting to think about a chemical that you can introduce to your body that's going to change your relationships with other people. The standard treatment for relationships, in the medical sense, has always been some kind of counseling or something like this, right? That's 99% of why people go to a psychotherapist or a counselor or something like that in the first place. It's like they're struggling to get close to other people. There's something going on with their relationships, and that just permeates throughout every other aspect of their life and impacts their health. And so if I'm hearing you right, you're testing the effect of oxytocin as a sort of a supplement. Yeah, I think I read that you're going to be injecting it into intranasal, right?
Yes.
And you're the big picture is looking at health, but you're in the short term, you're looking at performance.
Exactly.
Right. And so could you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you expect to find with performance? What does that mean?
Okay, yeah. So in the ECHO project, so we have people come in groups, so groups of 3, and we have them do all kinds of tasks, group tasks that they have to do. So they have to really work together to do these tasks. And while they're doing these tasks, we measure all kinds of things. So we measure their performance on these tasks, and the tasks are also military relevant. So one of them is flying a virtual unmanned vehicle, which was also developed in cooperation with the military. But we also measure things like psychophysiology, so their heart rate, their skin conductance. We also record their behavior and their audio. And one of the things we also want to look at there is, for example, synchrony between people. So how are their behaviors synchronized, their language synchronized, their physiology, how is it synchronized? Because synchrony is a very important part of human cohesive social behavior.
Right.
And all kinds of other stuff, like, for example, with the audio, we can look at really analyze speech and who's talking, how are they talking to each other, and all kinds of things.
Right. So you're casting a wide net there, looking at this sort of this group dynamic and the role of cohesion in there. Now, cohesion, I mean, it's been, cohesion as far as social psychology goes, has been one of the most studied, phenomena in the field for the last 50 years. But the thing that's new, at least in the last probably 10, 15 years or so, has been looking at cohesion in virtual teams and virtual groups, right? And there's a lot of interesting reasons why and interesting applications of virtual groups. And one of them I think you touched on here, which is, a lot of military personnel are collaborating with other soldiers or other people, in a virtual context, whether they're flying a plane or a drone or, coordinating, some kind of mission, So and that is can be a sort of monumental task, right? Trying, like, it's hard enough collaborating with people face to face, right? Getting on the same page and being a team with other people. Although I think if anybody facilitates cohesion better or best, I suppose it might be the military, because they rely so strongly on groups and teams. And still, there's this challenge of the virtual group thing. Now, in my field, so I'm in public health, and I'm in a kinesiology department, and we focus mainly on physical activity, and how to promote physical activity to impact public health. And that is also a monumental task. And one of the challenges that people have in our field is to number one, reach a lot of people, enough people to impact population health. And also to get people or to harness people's motivations, their values in a way that makes physical activity attractive. Right? Like, well, how do you get people to do this? And it's the same thing like in any other kind of health behavior. Like, how do you get people to stop smoking? How do you get people to drink less or drink more, depending on what kind of study you're looking at? But so that's been a big challenge. But where these virtual groups come in is, number one, as soon as you introduce a virtual group into this intervention context, you open the door wide open to how many people you can reach with this thing. Now, the thing that we know works pretty well are group-based interventions. But group-based interventions, they're pretty costly in terms of resources, trying to coordinate schedules and face-to-face. And so there's some trade-offs there in face-to-face groups. And so we've been trying to go towards a virtual group model as well. The thing that happens when you do that, though, like everybody else has been finding, it's just really hard to get people to buy into a virtual group. Yeah. Right? It just doesn't have the same kind of impact. And so we've been exploring that as well. We just created an application in my lab that is essentially a kind of an automated team building application. That's it's a concept for a social media application. We just published it in the Journal of Medical Internet Research a few days ago. Yeah. And the idea there is to design these. Every interaction that you have with somebody online in social media is constrained in some way. The designer of that platform has made it possible for you to do some things and not other things. And so we designed with the intent in mind of putting participants and users through this series of activities, things that they can do, and in fact sometimes have to do, to build a sense of team cohesion. And so and that also has its drawbacks. It's not as though you can just build team cohesion in a virtual setting like that. Yeah. That easily. And I don't know if you've been finding that in research in the lab over there. But so yeah, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the challenges that you've been running into in trying to what are the challenges that you're trying to overcome in promoting cohesion within the military population?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have 3 people come in. And we actually also thought about, because we have a side project where there's only 1 person, and we also thought about maybe creating a virtual group for this person to also compare real groups to virtual groups. But it was technically a bit difficult because I think what you're saying is really interesting, and it's like an age when virtual groups are so prominent. Right. And in our groups, I mean, we have people come in who really don't know each other, right? And we have this limited amount of time to try and really get them to form some kind of cohesive behavior and some group cohesion. And I think what's also important there is that we see that, for example, common challenges and common goals are very important, and it was also very difficult to find tasks that put all people on the same level in the group, because there's always I mean, by nature there are people who are more prominent in groups, who take more of a leadership role, which is in a way natural and fine, but can also kind of disturb the group cohesion that is going on. Right. Another thing that we also do is look at only teams, and so non-mixed gender teams for now. But of course, this is also interesting, looking how mixed gender teams would handle situations, also mixed race teams. What are challenges there? Because as I said, for example, for Oxytocin, cohesion within a certain group that you identify with is not always the same as cohesion without group members or members that are not in your group, which I think would be in the real life application also a very big challenge, because the military is such a diverse group as well.
Yeah, we've been finding the same thing. We've been doing some studies in my lab looking at virtual groups and and trying to build team cohesion. And we did a study that looked specifically at this. We looked at we had dyads come into the lab, and some of them were friends, and some of them were complete strangers. And this is, you know, this sort of mirrors some of the problems that you're mentioning, and also the problems that we have in, you know, group-based physical activity programs in general, which is, you know, what's the right mix of people there? You know, do you allow people to make their own groups? Do you kind of try to match people? Do you play like Match.com and try to get people in some kind of, you try to make a optimal cocktail of you know, people in that group? That is probably one of the hardest, or if not the hardest, you know, challenge in doing this kind of, you know, group-based, any kind of group-based intervention. But yeah, we're finding the same thing. You know, generally people who are friends, they just walk in with a little bit more cohesion to begin with. So they may not need, you know, that extra, you know, jolt. But yeah, we find the same kinds of things that you're talking about. You know, it's very you know, cohesion is higher when there's a, you know, there's a group goal in mind, right? There's some kind of group identity. And there's, in fact, a whole sort of literature on the best ways to, you know, structure the group process to produce that, you know, to produce that cohesion outcome, to produce a cohesive group.
Yeah.
So, so what I'm kind of interested in here is the idea that oxytocin could actually be useful in in behavior change, you know, health promotion programs, but especially ones that use virtual groups, where it's so hard to develop the same kind of group cohesion that one could in a, you know, face-to-face setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. So I think there's a number of different applications there. Now I want to get into the oxytocin a little bit more as well, and ask you a little bit about, like, well, how much oxytocin do you need to give somebody, and like, what does you know, do you give it to them like right before you know, they perform a task, or is it, you know, something you gotta, you know, dose in over time? How does this work?
That's a really good question, and that's like a big problem as well. So so we give oxytocin intranasally, and there are different studies using different doses. You have like 40 international units. It's a small dose, or 20 international units, and it's actually very unclear which dose is effective and which dose might work for some people. And there is growing consensus that, you know, it might be really worthwhile to look at the individual, because it might really depend on the individual, because it might not be that more is just better. There might be an optimal dosage somewhere in the middle. And there's a whole debate as well whether how does oxytocin actually work? Does it actually, what exactly in the body does it influence if you administer it intranasally? Does it just have peripheral effects? Does it really get to the brain? And there's still very inconclusive. And usually when you give people oxytocin, you wait 45 minutes before it kicks in. And then there's this idea that it might work for some hours, but again, it's very like it's very vague what exactly like is happening.
So we're not really that close to, you know, being able to give somebody a recommended dose of oxytocin to improve their social relationships or anything like that. Oh, you still there?
Yes, sorry.
Did you hear what I said?
No, I didn't.
I said so we're not really that close to being able to prescribe oxytocin for, you know, somebody who wants to you know, improve their social relationships or anything like this. I mean, this sounds like very preliminary sort of mechanistic work that you're doing over there, and some of the only, you know, work that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
on oxytocin, and especially in groups. I think you're the only lab that's looking at this. So, yeah. So some of the studies that you're doing right now, I saw some that were impressed. You know, doing some pilot work, looking at oxytocin and in these groups. What's sort of the you know, what's the long range plan here? Where are you guys going with this?
You mean in terms of how long the study will last, or
Yeah,
how?
yeah, exactly. How long will it last? You know, is this leading up to an intervention? Some kind
Um,
of institutionalized kind of program for soldiers that everybody will go through as part of, basic training or something like this.
yeah, I mean, that will be the idea. But this will be like a really long study, like a year-long study, because there's so many people we need to test and so many things we want to look at. But I mean, yeah, of course, the idea of all this oxytocin research is to, in some way, maybe see it implemented somewhere. And I think the idea is never to kind of replace existing things that are there right now. For example, also with patients, like the idea is not to replace the therapy, but just see if it could in some way help these
Right.
additional treatments. And I think the same for this cohesion study, to see if oxytocin in some way can help jumpstart the group cohesion, maybe.
Right.
And yeah, of course, the idea would be that it would be great if it would be applicable in the long run. But this is a very long endeavor, I think, because yeah, we'd also have to look at. So we only give people the oxytocin once, and we'd have to look at, you know, what happens if you give it multiple times. Would this be
Right.
beneficial? So there's it's a long way, I think, from being really implemented. But hopefully,
Right. Yeah, it
yeah.
sounds like you're doing a lot of dose response kind of work, dose response studies. So, are you aware of any risks of, taking too much oxytocin? Is there a such thing?
Um, I don't like, so as I said, we give them one-time oxytocin, which doesn't seem to have any long-lasting effect, and then giving them like repetitive oxytocin. I think it's just this is also very new, so I don't think a lot of people have actually really looked at the long-term maybe side effects. Um, and also long term for now is mostly like giving them oxytocin for a few weeks, which is, I mean, only relatively long, I think.
Right.
So again, there the research is very, yeah, it's still very new as to what it might do on the in the long run. But I think
Sure.
so far, yeah, it seems to be without any major negative side effects.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's really. Was it a difficult process getting an IRB approved for, using oxytocin? I mean, it does seem like a relatively, I don't know, to my eye, it seems like a relatively safe treatment, and maybe not so hard because you guys are. I think you're doing this in the hospital,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah.
yes, so that wasn't a big problem then,
No,
or
because
challenge.
we had been doing I mean, the lab has been doing oxytocin research for some years, and I
Yeah.
don't know how difficult it was in the beginning, but like luckily the research on oxytocin is quite substantial now, and there's quite good evidence that this one-time dose is um, completely fine. So yeah, so because we have a long tradition of doing oxytocin, I think yeah we didn't encounter too many problems.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Cool.
there's a lot of supervision, and it has to be at the hospital, and yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Cool. So what's I want to ask you, what do you find most satisfying or interesting about the work that you're doing there in the band lab?
Um, I guess I mean this is really I guess yeah, just like the idea of working towards improving the lives of people who really suffer. I mean, in this particular case, the veterans, and we see them every day, and it's really like you can do. I mean, also the project is very nice and to work on, and we look at a lot of different, interesting new things, I think. And then knowing that it eventually will lead to hopefully some improvement in the lives of some people, that's, yeah, I guess that's a big motivation.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I do see some potential. You know, one of the purposes of meeting was trying to find some areas of potential collaboration, and I do see at least a couple. You know, one being the application of oxytocin to physical activity groups.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea there is that when promoting physical activity, and the way that typically gets done is groups sign up for a physical activity program. The program is usually being delivered by a local health department or some kind of health oriented organization. And they'll organize it, and groups register, and it's kind of like a competition or friendly competition.
Mm-hmm.
Your group, a bunch of different groups sign up, and you keep track of how much activity you get. Mostly, it's usually walking. People keep track of how much they walk every week. Try to get their 10,000 steps in and things like this. And the basic idea is that your group will set a goal for how much they want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout that program. So it could be everybody gets 10,000 steps, or the group, if you're creating a group level goal, the group will walk a total of, the equivalent of, 1,000 miles or whatever the case may be. There's a number of different ways to do it. But the idea here is that once you have that group goal and there's some sense of group identity, that you can develop a sense of cohesion. And then, in the middle of the program, that's when people usually drop out and say, this is too much, I can't do this anymore. They're more likely to stick with it because they don't want to let the other people in their group down.
Yeah.
We already set this group goal. I found sort of my role in this group. I don't want to let other people down. And so building cohesion, they're less likely to do that. And so we're kind of seeing some of this right now in a program we just launched. It's a pilot program for military spouses, actually.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and so this is another hard hit population
Mm-hmm.
in the military. You think about that they're very they're almost in transition almost all the time, going from one place to another, or they're in one place but their spouse is getting shipped overseas and all over the place, and they have to relearn where everything is in a new community, make new friends, and and on and on. And so really hard hit population in terms of stress, and that basically infuses every other area of their life, including a lot of their health behaviors. And so we designed, based on a lot of conversations that we had with military spouses in our community, a program that would fit their needs. And it's an online or mostly online physical activity and wellness program. And it's also group-based.
Yeah.
And so we try to make it easy for the groups to, collaborate with one another. We did some team building, kinds of exercises at a program kickoff, that was face-to-face. And now we're just trying to sort of maintain this, cohesion throughout the program by, encouraging them to meet up with each other once a week, in their groups, and, to chat with each other online, whatever the case may be, to give them team challenges, every week they get a new set of team challenges. And so to try to, keep stoking that cohesion.
Yeah.
But what we're finding, we're about midway through the program. It's a 12-week program. And some people are kind of, starting to drop off. Not everybody, but, and it could be the case that, participants who are dropping out we're going to drop out anyways. They do have very busy lives. You know, a lot of them have kids and they're going to school, like all kinds of things. And so, but again, it's the idea that, you know, if they're part of, you know, a cohesive group, they, you know, they find value in that group. They find, you know, connection in that group. That they're more likely to stick with a program like this, and, you know, take better care of themselves, and so on and so forth. And so I do think that there is a place for this kind of intervention. You know, you mentioned you don't want to change, you know, what's already being done, but maybe we can do something to, you know, to add on to that. Yeah. And it seems to me like oxytocin might be that little thing that you add on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we can think about that for a little bit. I know that there's a lot of I think that idea is fairly innovative, and that's really valued by a lot of funding agencies, NIH, USDA to some extent, and it maybe even NSF, because you're doing such a, you know, a lot of mechanistic work. I think there's a lot of potential there for a really cool project.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. So if you want to talk to Josh about that, and hopefully we can reconnect sometime in the near future, and maybe hash that out, and see, and sort of gauge interest and whether or not there's something there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure he'll be really interested. I'm sure.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Very good. Well, that's really all the questions I had for you. Is there anything else you want to mention about the work you're doing, or any questions for me?
I don't think so. I guess my only, I was thinking about the physical activity, because I'm just also really interested in like synchrony and motor synchronization, and that's also a bit of physical activity. So in the virtual team groups, it's like they have a virtual team, but they do physical activity on their own, or what is?
Yeah, they do physical activity on their own. Now, there are like as you mentioned, there are applications where you can collaborate or exercise with other people sort of synchronously, right? Like you could do it in front of your computer. You could do it you could go for a run outside and be connected to somebody on your phone. Like there are these, you know, applications out there, or a walk, doesn't have to be a run. Yeah, I mean, you could be connected to somebody all the time. Yeah. And, you know, that might be an interesting research question. You know, like, what is the right amount of presence, or the dose response of, you know, presence, you know, to, you know, across time, because, you know, you probably don't want to be connected to people all the time, but, you know, when is sort of the right time to do that? And so, you know, how do you do that? Now, there are also other applications where, you know, you could, you know, you can record a workout or a walk and make that available to somebody else in your, you know, in your group, so that they can see, you know, how long you walked, how fast you walked, whatever the case may be. And you could walk with them asynchronously. Yeah. So you could play that, you know, you could look at your, you know, stats next to their stats. I actually talked to a startup they were in Liverpool, I want to say, or somewhere in Britain. I can't remember exactly where, but they were developing this app specifically for running, not so much walking, but, you know, you could obviously use it for that as well. So I think there's a lot of, you know, cool technology solutions to the problems that technology has created in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it would be great to see what we can do together. Yeah, it would be really cool.
Agreed. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for your time, and look forward to chatting with you and maybe even Josh at some point.
Yeah. I'm sure he's just really busy right now, and he asked me to do it, but I'm sure he'll he'll be excited as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Yep, I understand. Great. Well, thanks for your time.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, take care.